Now, in the very first video of this playlist, I already explained how to do the covenant grace prayer. This video, before going into temptation, because temptation is definitely going to come, in this video I just want to give a supplement to that first video, and it's something to target. Jesus taught me a principle a little bit later in my walk that could have been more useful at the very beginning. However, when he taught me this principle, I was able to look back and see it throughout all the time he had been teaching me. So I'm giving you guys a little bit of a shortcut that I didn't have, something that you can look out for. Basically, Jesus taught me that fear is the root of sin. And if you can identify the fear, Jesus can lead you in how to uproot the sin easily. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole science of how this works in this video. I have another video for that in my playlist called Sin and the Law. But in this video, I'm going to give you the right now answers. So basically, with fear is not just an emotion. Fear can be emotional or intellectual. Emotional fear is a lie that leads us to self-preservation through self-produced or self-justified means. Emotional fear we're all familiar with easily just as soon as you think about it. It's anxiety, terror, that kind of thing. Intellectual fear is a little bit more tricky to identify, and some people may not even call this fear. However, this is what Jesus referred to it as for me. He called it fear. He said it was intellectual. Intellectual fear is a lie that leads to self-preservation of self-interests. So it's a little bit more indirect than emotional fear. In other words, this particular fear is basically self-centeredness. Examples of this would be greed, lust, envy, and things like these. So let's take a look at how fear has a direct connection to sin. Let's take a look at lust first. What Jesus taught me was lust technically can be defined as fear of lack. So it's a fear of not having enough of something, fear of losing something, fear that you're not going to have something. Usually, lust has some type of fear that is associated with lacking something. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, but this love of money that Paul's speaking about is technically lust towards money, which is fear of not having money, leads to all kinds of evil, right? People who love money usually are afraid of not having it. So that's one prime example. Another one is idolatry. Idolatry is actually a type of lust. Idolatry is a fear that God is not going to live up to being God. Idolatry is fear that God is not going to provide, He's not going to help, He's not going to sustain, He's not going to support, He's not going to do the things that make Him God. And what happens when we give into this fear? We're then tempted to find another God, or tempted to find something else to fulfill what we feel like God is not fulfilling, or He's not going to do for us. And then let's take a look at anger. Anger is a little bit tricky because this one can be fierce in different ways. Sometimes anger can spring up from other sins. But when we look at anger, usually the root fear of anger is fear of not being justified, fear of not being vindicated, fear of not having vengeance. So what do? We take matters into our own hands, and then we sin against someone. With all these examples, the answer really is trusting Jesus. If you have fear of lack, you're supposed to trust that Jesus is going to provide, which then brings us straight into idolatry, right? If you're afraid that you're not going to have enough money, you're not going to have enough food, you're not going to have enough of this or that, we're supposed to go to Jesus, ask him for wisdom, and receive wisdom and the answer. And we won't even get to sin. If you deal with the fear that's leading to the lust, leading to the desire, you're not even going to get to the sin. Likewise with anger. If we trust Jesus to deal with our problems, if we are upset with someone, and I'm talking about legit anger, as in, let's say someone wronged your child or wronged you, the only way out of that anger really is trusting Jesus to be judge, trusting Jesus to handle it. If we don't do that, we might hurt someone. So those are just a couple examples of how, in identifying the fear, it actually caters to wounds that we may have suffered. And that's how the sin can drop off. A lot of people sin because they're wounded. A lot of people don't even actually like their sin. And then there's people who do like their sin and they're just believing lies, but it still falls into this same pattern of fear. Is it intellectual, where we fall into lusts and envies and greeds and cravings? Or is it emotional, where we're literally having to defend ourselves? As I mentioned, anger can be a little bit tricky because anger can also come from fear of error. Anger can also be used to defend ourselves if we feel threatened. You know, the fight or flight response. So anyway, the point is, if you really want to really get the root of sins, it's very good that when you're doing the covenant prayer, the grace prayer, to ask Jesus specifically for the truth that will destroy the lie of fear. And that will just uproot the whole plant. When he gives you that truth, you get full out deliverance. You don't have to sit there dealing with each sin and dealing with, all the thought processes that come and all these temptations. Just go straight for the lie. For more information and deeper science in how fear works, what it is and how it's the root of sin, and even examples of the scriptures, you're going to want to check out the video, Fear is the Root of All Sin, in the Sin and the Law playlist. May both the Father and Jesus Christ bless you.